My fiancée went on a girls' night, then but dialed me while she was trashing my proposal to another guy. I listened for 15 minutes. I didn't interrupt. I just texted her friend in the same group. Put her on speakerphone for me. The sudden silence on the other end was golden. I came home to a packed suitcase on the porch. I, 29M, thought I knew the woman I was planning to spend my life with. 3 months ago, I proposed to her after 2 years of dating, and she said yes with tears in her eyes. The ring cost me 4 months of salary, but seeing her face light up made every penny worth it. Or so I thought. Last Friday night, she announced she was going out for girls' night with her usual crew. Nothing unusual there. She did this maybe twice a month, and I trusted her completely. I told her to have fun and settled in for a quiet evening of Netflix and leftover pizza. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. Her name appeared on the screen with an incoming call. I smiled, thinking maybe she was calling to say goodnight or check in. I answered cheerfully, ready to hear about whatever drama her friends were discussing over Cosmos. But she hadn't meant to call me. The audio was muffled at first, like the phone was buried deep in her purse. I was about to hang up when I heard her voice clearly through what sounded like bar noise. She was mid-conversation, and what I heard made my stomach drop to my feet. She was telling someone about how disappointed she was with my proposal. Not just disappointed, disgusted. She described it as pathetic and so typical of him. She went into excruciating detail about how I'd taken her to the same restaurant where we had our first date, thinking it was romantic, when really it just showed how unimaginative and cheap I was. I sat frozen on my couch, the phone pressed to my ear like it was surgically attached. Part of me wanted to hang up immediately, but a larger part needed to hear everything. It was like watching a car accident in slow motion. Horrifying, but impossible to look away from. She continued, explaining to whoever would listen how the ring was embarrassingly small, and how she'd had to fake her reaction because she didn't want to hurt my feelings in public. She laughed, actually laughed, when she described how excited I'd been, calling it cute in a sad, puppy dog way. But it got worse. She started talking about someone named Marcus from her office. Apparently, he'd been asking her out for months, and she'd been tempted. She described him as everything my fiancé isn't: successful, confident, and generous. She mentioned how Marcus had shown her pictures of a ring he was considering for his ex-girlfriend, and it made mine look like it came from a gumball machine. The betrayal cut deeper with every word. This wasn't just trash talking, this was character assassination. She was systematically destroying 2 years of what I thought was genuine love and partnership. She talked about our relationship like it was a charity case, something she was enduring rather than enjoying. Her friends, women I'd cooked dinner for, bought birthday gifts for, welcomed into our home, were encouraging her. They were asking why she was settling, telling her she deserved better, suggesting she should explore her options before getting married. One of them mentioned that Marcus had been asking about her relationship status at some office party last week. I recognized the voice of her best friend, the maid of honor we'd already asked to be in our wedding. She was the loudest voice in the chorus, practically begging my fiancé to reconsider the engagement. She suggested that getting cold feet was normal, and maybe it was a sign she should listen to her instincts. 15 minutes of this. 15 minutes of listening to the woman I loved tear apart everything I thought we'd built together. 15 minutes of realizing that every smile, every kiss, every moment of intimacy over the past months had been a performance on her part. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. I wasn't going to interrupt this conversation. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing I'd heard everything. Instead, I was going to let her finish, let her really commit to every cruel word. But I wasn't going to suffer alone. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up social media. I found her friend Sarah, who I knew was in the group that night. Sarah had always been the quietest one, the most sympathetic to me when the others made jokes at my expense. If anyone in that group had a conscience, it was her. I sent Sarah a text message. Put her on speakerphone for me. The effect was immediate and beautiful. The chatter stopped mid-sentence. I could hear Sarah's sharp intake of breath, then some hurried whispering. Someone, probably Sarah, was explaining what had just happened. I heard my fiancé's voice change from confident and cruel to panicked and small. She said my name like a question, like she was hoping this was all some terrible mistake. The background noise of the bar seemed to fade as her friends probably huddled around her phone, realizing the magnitude of what had just happened. I didn't say anything. I just listened to the silence stretch out, punctuated by her increasingly desperate attempts to explain or apologize or somehow undo what couldn't be undone. Her voice was shaking now, nothing like the confident woman who'd been mocking me moments before. Finally, I spoke. I told her I'd heard enough, and I hung up. My phone started ringing immediately, call after call, which I ignored. Text messages flooded in, some from her, some from her friends, all trying to minimize or explain or justify what I'd heard. I turned my phone off and sat in the darkness of our living room, trying to process what my life had just become. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent the dark hours making decisions. By morning, I had a plan. When she finally came home around noon on Saturday, stumbling through apologies and explanations that rang hollow after what I'd heard, I listened with the patience of someone who'd already moved on emotionally. She tried to claim she was just venting, that she didn't mean any of it, that she'd been drinking and her friends were filling her head with doubts. I let her finish, then calmly told her I believed she'd meant every word. I explained that I'd heard her real feelings, her real assessment of our relationship, and her real interest in Marcus from her office. I thanked her for being so honest when she thought I couldn't hear, because it saved us both from a terrible mistake. The engagement was off. She tried to argue, to negotiate, to promise things would be different. But I'd heard her truth, and there was no coming back from that. I told her she had until the end of the weekend to collect her things and find somewhere else to stay. She left that afternoon with tears and accusations, calling me unforgiving and cruel. She tried to turn it around on me, suggesting that eavesdropping on a private conversation was a violation of trust. I almost laughed at that logic. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since everything imploded, and the aftermath has been both exactly what I expected and completely surprising. She moved in with her sister temporarily, but not before trying every manipulation tactic in the book. She enlisted her mother to call me, pleading for reconciliation and claiming her daughter was just having pre-wedding jitters. She had her friends reach out through social media, trying to convince me that everyone says things they don't mean when they're drinking. The most interesting development came from Sarah, the friend who'd received my text that night. She reached out to me privately a few days after everything happened. She apologized for being part of that conversation and admitted she'd been uncomfortable with the direction it was taking. She told me that my ex-fiancé had been complaining about our relationship for months, not just that night. According to Sarah, the girls' night crew had been actively encouraging her to break up with me since Christmas. They'd been filling her head with ideas about trading up and suggesting she was too good for someone in my profession. Sarah had tried to defend me a few times, which is why she'd been so quiet during that final conversation. She also confirmed my suspicions about Marcus. My ex had been having lunch meetings with him that weren't exactly professional. Nothing physical had happened yet, at least as far as Sarah knew, but the emotional affair was well underway. Marcus had apparently been promising her a lifestyle I could never provide, complete with expensive dinners and weekend getaways. The most satisfying part of Sarah's confession was learning about the immediate aftermath of my text. Apparently, the moment my voice came through that phone, the entire group realized they'd been caught in something ugly. The other women scattered quickly, suddenly remembering they had early morning plans. My ex was left sitting alone at the bar, frantically calling me while drunk and humiliated. Sarah told me she'd never seen someone sober up so quickly. Meanwhile, word had somehow gotten back to Marcus about what had happened. According to my ex's social media activity, which I checked once out of morbid curiosity, he'd suddenly become much less interested in those lunch meetings. Apparently, being exposed as the other man in someone's emotional affair wasn't the sophisticated image he wanted to maintain at work. I returned the ring to the jeweler and got back about 60% of what I'd paid. It stung financially, but it felt like paying for the most valuable lesson of my life. I used part of that money to book a weekend trip for myself, something I'd never done while we were together because she always complained about the expense of anything that wasn't directly benefiting her. The relief I felt sitting on that beach alone, reading a book without someone criticizing my choice or complaining about being bored, was worth every penny I'd lost on that ring. Update 2. A month has passed, and the dust has finally settled enough for me to see the bigger picture of what I escaped. My ex made one final attempt at reconciliation 3 weeks ago. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, claiming she'd made a terrible mistake and wanted to work things out. She'd broken things off with Marcus. Apparently, he'd lost interest once he realized she came with drama and complications. She tried a different approach this time, acknowledging that what I'd heard was hurtful, but framing it as a moment of weakness rather than her true feelings. She claimed she'd been influenced by toxic friends and alcohol, that she'd never really wanted to hurt me. She even offered to cut contact with the friend group that had encouraged her behavior. I listened politely, but her words felt hollow. The woman I'd fallen in love with had been a carefully constructed performance, and now I'd seen the actress behind the character. Even if she was genuinely sorry, which I doubted, I couldn't unknow what I knew about how she really saw me. I told her I appreciated her apology, but the relationship was over permanently. She didn't take it well. The tears quickly turned to anger, and she started listing all the ways I'd been inadequate as a boyfriend. She claimed I was throwing away something good over one conversation, that I was too proud to forgive, that I'd never find someone who loved me as much as she had. The irony was perfect. In trying to convince me to take her back, she was proving exactly why I shouldn't. Even her apology couldn't exist without criticism and manipulation. After she left, I realized I felt nothing but pity for her. She was going to spend her life chasing some impossible standard, always looking for someone better, never appreciating what she had. The men she thought she deserved would see through her act eventually, just like I had. Sarah reached out again to let me know that the friend group had essentially disbanded. The other women were embarrassed about their role in the whole situation, and my ex had burned bridges with most of them by trying to blame them for encouraging her bad behavior. Sarah was the only one who'd taken responsibility for her part in it. The best part of this whole experience has been discovering who I am without someone constantly diminishing me. I'd gotten so used to her subtle criticisms and suggestions for improvement that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just exist without judgment. I've been sleeping better, eating what I want, watching movies she would have criticized, and generally enjoying my own company. I also reached out to some friends I'd lost touch with during the relationship. It's amazing how much your social circle shrinks when your partner finds fault with everyone you care about. These friends weren't surprised when I told them what had happened. Apparently, they'd all noticed how she treated me, but hadn't wanted to interfere. Update 3. It's been 3 months now, and I have one final update that really drives home how right I was to end things. Last week, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop near my office. We'd never met, but I recognized him from his social media photos that my ex had shown me months ago when she was just mentioning her attractive coworker. He approached me, which surprised me. He apologized for his role in what had happened and told me he felt terrible about the whole situation. According to him, my ex had portrayed our relationship as practically over, claiming we were only staying together out of convenience and that she was planning to break up with me anyway. But here's the interesting part. He told me that after everything exploded, she'd become increasingly desperate to maintain their connection. She'd started showing up at his office building, calling him constantly, and even contacting him through mutual friends when he stopped responding directly. He described her behavior as unhinged and said it had made him realize he'd dodged a bullet. He'd started seeing someone else, someone he described as stable and honest, and was much happier. He thanked me for inadvertently saving him from getting more involved with someone so manipulative. The conversation was surreal. Here was the man my ex had held up as everything I wasn't, telling me that I was lucky to be rid of her and that he pitted whoever ended up with her long-term. Marcus also mentioned that she'd been bad-mouthing me around their office, trying to make herself look like the victim of our breakup. But her increasingly erratic behavior had made it clear to everyone that there was more to the story than she was telling. I thanked him for his honesty and wished him well with his new relationship. As I walked away, I felt a deep sense of closure. The man she'd wanted instead of me had confirmed everything I'd concluded about her character. Last night, Sarah texted me some final gossip that she thought I should know. My ex had started dating someone new, a guy she'd met on a dating app who apparently has money and likes to show it off. Sarah had met him at a party and described him as flashy but shallow, someone who treats relationships like business transactions. According to Sarah, my ex seems happy with the arrangement. She gets expensive dinners and designer gifts, and he gets arm candy who makes him feel important. Sarah thinks it's exactly what my ex was looking for all along. Someone who values her for her appearance, and she can value for his wallet. I realized I felt genuinely happy for her. Not because I thought she deserved happiness, but because she'd found exactly the kind of superficial relationship she'd always wanted. She was no longer my problem or my responsibility. I've started dating again myself. Nothing serious yet, but I'm meeting people who seem genuinely interested in getting to know me rather than assessing my potential as a provider or status symbol. It's refreshing to have conversations about books, travel, and life goals without feeling like I'm being interviewed for a position I'm underqualified for. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you turns out to be the best thing. That accidental phone call saved me from years of marriage to someone who didn't respect me, didn't value what I offered, and would have spent our entire relationship looking for someone better. I'm grateful for that 15 minutes of brutal honesty. It hurt like hell at the time, but it set me free. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe button would mean the world to us. Please subscribe.